All right. Hi there, everyone, and welcome to Tech Thursday, a new Cornerstone series brought to you by Scheduling Conflicts and Holidays. All jokes aside, thank you so much for attending today. Today, we're going to be discussing how to use ChatGPT as an insurance agent and give a general overview of the use of AI in insurance as it stands now in a little more detail. That said, I do have a few housekeeping items to discuss, so I'm going to go ahead and do that before we get started. First, if you have a question, please feel free to type it in the question box. I'll answer questions near the end of the presentation during the Q&A, but if I see a question and I think it's relevant to what we're discussing, I will address it in the moment. Also, feel free to download the handout that I attached today. It is a copy of this presentation, but there are some links in there to additional reading if you're curious. Also, if you have a question and would rather, reach out to me directly to ask it, I'm always available. Just go ahead and send me an email at tlevine@crnstone.com or give me a call at the number on your screen. Don't feel like you have to rush and copy this information down now. I will display it again at the end of the webinar. Also, don't forget to sign up for our social media and subscribe to the weekly Monday Minute newsletter if you haven't yet. Also, with Cornerstone's agency services program, you're the pilot of your business and we're your flight crew. As a Cornerstone broker, you have access to expert services from our ASP program that can help you with business outside of your scope and planning for the future. We can create a customized plan for you based on your specific needs to ensure that you, your business, and your family are covered. Contact your Cornerstone representative for more information. And last but not least, don't forget, if you haven't signed up yet and are an agent with us, to sign up for AGB. AGB is our new and improved broker portal, which is available for all our partner brokers as your one-stop shop for managing your book of business through Cornerstone, from carrier and client information to commission schedules. If you have any questions about the new platform and your access, please reach out to your broker advisor or to the AGB support team at agbsupport@crnstone.com. So, sorry, I'm jumping on a little bit, but much like Edwin Starr's famed song, War, What Is It Good For?, which unfortunately seems to be unavailable today to play, today we'll be asking ChatGPT, what is it good for and what is it used for, as insurance agents at least. There's a lot to consider on the topic and quite a bit to dig into. Just as a disclaimer before we really get into things here, I am not an AI data scientist, but I am a technical person who's seen more uses of AI getting adopted and misunderstood. My goal in the last presentation that we did, as well as this one, is to educate you on the basics, as well as when to be skeptical of tools like this. If you haven't watched my last webinar focusing on what AI really is versus what all the hype is, I'd recommend watching that for more context for this presentation as well. It's all available on our resource center if you've signed up. If not, I'd recommend checking out our website and signing up for that to view the webinar. It was actually pretty interesting, and we had some really good questions. That being said, I'd like to ask you a question before we get into things. Would you rather be technically correct or not even wrong? That's a quote from Wolfgang Pauli, well, a partial quote at least. He's a theoretical physicist who coined the term not even wrong, and specifically he used it to critique students who had careless mistakes in papers or were missing large parts of a topic in which they were discussing. In my research for this presentation, that phrase crossed my mind quite a bit. Lots of people are spreading the word about ChatGPT and espousing its uses who realistically use ChatGPT as a stand-in word for other AI at large without proper context. I'm not saying I know all about what makes ChatGPT work, but it's just one small part of a larger general field called AI. So using it as a general term is kind of like calling a game system a Nintendo or every baseball player Babe Ruth. It makes a point so broad or general that it's not really useful and it doesn't describe the tool you're looking to use. If you're looking for insurance applications of specifically ChatGPT, I can think of a few, but there are only a few answers that make sense in my mind, at least, because of how it's worded and kind of the risk involved. It's a great facsimile of human intelligence, and it can be used as a good sounding board for review, but it's not always the right choice for the type of AI to fit different situations. We got more into that in the last presentation, but it can cause confusion and problems, and it can lead to a lot of confusion about what different types of AI are. being direct, ChatGPT is a really fancy text generation tool and a research tool. And given the possible liabilities involved in using it, that's kind of why I say there are really only a few ways to use it responsibly right now. And to illustrate the difference, I'm going to answer these three questions throughout this presentation. The first being, how is ChatGPT currently being used in insurance? The second is, in general, how is AI being used in insurance, which is kind of a very different question. And lastly is, can I expect AI to replace me as an agent? And that one's more of a follow-up because I hear a lot of concern about that. It was a question asked directly in my last presentation as well. And hopefully by reading through some of this and getting a better understanding of it, it might assuage some of those worries. So that being said, I decided to ask ChatGPT what exactly it thought it would be useful for in insurance. And I think this is a really good starting off point to kind of see the pros and cons of that tool. The main reason that I asked it is to kind of show where problems can arise, and I've color-coded each of these reply statements kind of by type, and we're going to go through them in a little more detail in the next few slides. The first, it has answering customer inquiries, along with assisting with compliance and regulations. Those are both highlighted in yellow, and that's because at least parts of their answer there I feel are missing or kind of misleading. Those are things that I could see it maybe being useful for, or maybe helping to design another bot to be useful for, but not maybe necessarily in its current form. The green replies are probably not bad. They're things that you could probably use them for, or at least use ChatGPT for, but I would be somewhat skeptical of them anyway, just because of how new the tool is. And the last one is in red, and that's generate personalized quotes. We'll get to that here in a second, but I think it's the most blatant misuse of this tool. But for now, I think the biggest point is that bottom one, which is, remember, while I can provide valuable assistance, it's essential to combine my capabilities with your expertise as an insurance agent. Always review and verify information and recommendations I provide to ensure their accuracy and relevance to your client's specific needs. And that's really the kind of takeaway that I would have from this conversation. The prompt that I used to get this reply from the AI was just, how can I utilize you to improve my business? I'm an insurance agent working with several carriers aimed at selling small groups as well as individuals, which I think should correspond to at least most of the attendees here. So let's go ahead and start with some of the okay statements. The first one was offering policy recommendations, and I guess I could see some of the usefulness of that. Maybe just trying to pick and choose between a few different policies it might be useful for, but honestly, it doesn't know enough to really tailor policy recommendations on its own like a real agent would. The reply itself said, based on specific needs of clients and preferences, I can describe if you describe their requirements to me, I can provide you with suitable insurance policy recommendations. And I think it means this incredibly broadly, and that's why I left it as a good idea. Mainly, I mean things like directing people to, an HMO versus a high deductible health plan. That might be something that it could be useful in deciding based on someone's current economic status, or, what type of needs they need out of their insurance. But as far as what specific product they need, I don't think it probably has enough information for that. A good thing to keep in mind is ChatGPT's last training data point is from December of 2021, and it does not have any more recent information than that, or at least it can give you today's date because it's provided that at the start of every day, but it's not going out there. It's not looking on the internet for other policies. It's not really tying into other things unless you have a premium subscription to ChatGPT. And even then, those uses are kind of limited, at least as far as you being able to code is concerned. Additionally, it might be able to provide product comparisons. And I think that's actually pretty useful and probably accurate. You'd have to give it every single part of the product to compare. You'd have to type in literally everything for the product or copy and paste it. But once it has all the information, it could probably do a good job of comparing what's in those plans. Like I said before, ChatGPT is a really good text generation tool, and it can act as a good facsimile of human intelligence, even though it's not really human intelligence. Like I said, we got into that more in the last webinar, but it might be able to look and compare two different types of plans. That's something it'd be pretty good at, as far as looking through the overall content of both plans is concerned. And lastly is the real big one, which is supporting content creation. I think this is actually incredibly useful and probably the biggest thing that we'll see this AI used for, specifically ChatGPT. It can create informative, engaging content for websites, blogs, social media platforms, and you could actually use it to help provide with ideas and suggestions. It could do review of different articles you're planning on posting, and it can even proofread your documents. Actually, there are a few other companies that use AI to do just that, and ChatGPT is a real logical extension of those kinds of uses. Next, we have some more of the slightly incorrect statements, and I'll dig more into these here specifically, but there are 3 points that I think need addressed for both of these replies. The first is that I don't think they're specific enough. The second is that the regulation on them will not be up to date, and the rules and procedures that they use are probably not up to date. And lastly is that the time saving is only in certain cases with these replies. Now, the two topics at hand are answering customer inquiries, like a normal chatbot, and assistance with compliance and regulation. Now, I'm not saying that the ChatGPT won't be useful for these things in the future, but at least as it stands now, I'd be a little trepidatious using it for these kinds of things. Mainly, the first one, answering customer inquiries. You can use me to answer common questions and provide information about insurance policies, coverage options, claim procedures, and other relevant details to an extent. Remember, it only has certain information that was available up to December of 2021. So if you're, using a new product that came out in 2022 or 2023, it probably won't know anything about that product. So it won't be able to answer common questions about that product, or it'll make something up. One of the things we covered in our last presentation is AI hallucinations, and ChatGPT would probably hallucinate in this case and give you something that is probably not correct. So while it can be helpful for answering these kinds of things, think of it in a very broad and general sense. Additionally, one of the other next ones was assistance with compliance and regulation. Like I said, the last data point it has is from December of 2021. Things are slightly updated and kept up to date, but really it doesn't have direct access to the internet. It's not like Google's Bard AI or Bing's Bing AI or whatever they're calling it now these days. It doesn't have direct contact with the internet, so it won't be able to run searches, and it won't be able to just link you directly to its sources. So these are issues to consider when dealing with compliance and regulation. So I think while it could help with that, probably not in its current form. And lastly, we get into the biggest incorrect statement that it gave me, which is that it can generate personalized quotes. The reply that I got specifically said, provide me with the necessary details, such as client demographics, coverage requirements, and other relevant factors, and I can help generate personalized quotes for individuals or small groups. This can expedite the quotation process and enhance your efficiency. Well, I thought that was strange because I know that ChatGPT does not actually connect directly to carriers or the internet at large. So I thought I'd ask for clarification. And you can see the full transcript of my conversation with the AI by clicking on the conversation link if you've downloaded the presentation itself. I have those on these slides, but you can read through my full conversation there. Basically, I asked it to elaborate on that point and say, can I use you to generate a quote? Now, here's where it got a little tricky. In the first paragraph, it sounds very positive. It says, yes, you can definitely use me to generate insurance quotes. To do so, provide me with the necessary details, with these inputs, I can generate personalized quotes for your clients. In the second paragraph, where it kind of hides information. It says, in my mind, keep in mind, well, I can provide an estimated quote. The final premium may be subject to change and verification and approval by the insurance carrier. It's always important to double check generated quote and ensure it aligns with carrier's guidelines and underwriting process. That's the big takeaway here. It doesn't actually run any quotes. And that's the biggest concern that I've had as, how this kind of AI will be implemented. I mentioned in my last webinar about a lawyer who's currently facing sanctions because he used ChatGPT to research a case, and it turns out that case was completely made up and not factual. In fact, he submitted it all the way through the review process, signed that he had reviewed all the case information, and then come to find out, oh, ChatGPT made up the case. It doesn't exist. That's something really big to keep in mind here. I would never use something like this to generate an insurance quote. And I think the fact that it even claims that it can do this is probably very scary and wrong. That's something that I would get on if you're watching this presentation, someone from OpenAI. Either way, it's really not at all possible. I asked to clarify again and even prompted further in my conversation, and it finally backtracked and said it couldn't run quotes, at least not directly, but don't be using a tool like this to generate quotes. AIs like this are very prone to making up information, providing false information, and honestly, unless you're in touch with a carrier, it's not going to be a valid quote anyway. So just don't use AI for things like that. It might be useful for getting an estimate of how much things might have cost back in 2021, but nowadays I would shy away from that and steer clear from any agent who says they're using AI to do quoting like this. That being said, more directly for all of us, how should I use ChatGPT as an agent? Well, in my mind, it's great for an initial starting point for creative projects or text-heavy communication. Like I said before, social media post generation, it can generate content faster than any human writer. Not only that, it'll do it in a very engaging and seemingly authentic way. It's kind of difficult to pick out what's AI generated unless you're really used to reading its prompts and reading its writing. So if you're just trying to generate a social media post, get some attention, keep up with, different posting times and make sure that you have all eyes on your posts and you don't know what to type, ChatGPT might be a good option for a place to start. It also can recommend different topics. So if you're completely, at a loss for what to type in for a post, you can ask it for examples. You can ask it for, even full-on generation. And if you already have a post typed up and you're trying to get it proofread, it can do that for you too. Grammarly, which is a paid service that I actually really like, uses AI tools to kind of analyze your text and see where you can improve on it as far as tonality and as far as everything else is concerned with, grammar, punctuation, pretty much all of it. It's a really useful tool for that kind of thing. And kind of in the same vein, it can be really useful for newsletter creation for the same reasons. You can feed it starting info and it can write you a full letter. You can say, hey, I'm writing a letter to person X. They are very interested in Y and Z. If you could type up an email that'll, kind of get their attention, then I'd appreciate it. And then it'll probably supply you with a full email. Just have to do a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of editing, and you can, use that as your email. It will definitely save you time if you're like me, where you waffle back and forth over what different, phrases to use and how to best specify exactly what you're trying to say. So it can be very useful for that. Next up is SEO optimization. Now, SEO optimization is actually really interesting. It can provide you with meta taglines and headline data for your site. So if you want to give it a goal of saying, hey, here's my website, kind of copy paste it as it stands. Here's kind of our homepage. I need to get higher up in these sorts of news site searches. And it'll give you examples of ways to kind of enhance that so you appear higher in the rankings. It can also create content for your site based on those prompts. So you can just kind of ask it, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. This is my examples. Can you improve on this? And it'll definitely do that as well. Another good use is in chatbot creation. And this is very different from chatbot integration. So a lot of people, and this is kind of a good example to what I hearkened back to earlier, say that ChatGPT is used actively by websites for chatbots. It's correct, but it's not really correct. It's really not even wrong to say that because ChatGPT doesn't have direct plugins to other sites. It doesn't. If you're using a third-party app to talk into ChatGPT, then what's really happening is you're entering your text, it's sending it from what you entered over to ChatGPT's service using API calls probably, and then sending that response back to you. It's not really directly integrated, and it's not really meant to be directly integrated into other sites yet. So if someone says they're powered by ChatGPT, I'd be a little skeptical of that too. But anyway, I digress. It can know exactly how to code. And actually, this is one of its primary use cases. If you're using ChatGPT to kind of critique what you're writing and maybe trying to get it to help automate scripts and processes on your website, then it'll probably give you pretty good code, or at least a good starting point. So if you're doing all your own website coding, it can be incredibly useful if you're not familiar with HTML or the type of coding that you're actually using it for. So that can be pretty useful. And actually, we have a good and relevant question here from Bill, which is, can you use it to create a PowerPoint presentation? More than likely. I haven't actually used it for that case myself, but you could give it like, some general prompts and say, hey, I'm looking to break this info up into slides. Could you do that for me? And it'll at least give you the text information for all of the slides that you can copy and paste onto. If you're then looking for different types of stock images or things to tie into that, you could prompt the AI to say, hey, I also need images for this. I'm using another AI tool to generate images. Can you give me some prompts based on these ideas? And it'll give you prompts to plug into other AI tools to generate images for your presentation. Excuse me, for your presentation. So while it can't directly create a PowerPoint, what it can do is give you all the information to fill in onto a PowerPoint and give you ideas for how to create the images that you'll need for your PowerPoint. So it can be a pretty impressive tool in that regard. And we also had another question here that was directly related to this, so I'll go ahead and address it now. It's when asking to critique a newsletter, for example, do you literally copy and paste the newsletter into ChatGPT, or is it uploaded somehow? So yeah, you would just say, I'm looking to create a newsletter, here's the information I want, and then it'll generate the newsletter for you, and then you would copy and paste it into your email. You'd probably want to critique it a little bit to get it to be a little more manageable, maybe correct one or two statements. But yeah, that's kind of how you would use it for newsletter creation. And in a follow-up to that, kind of the same vein, which is how does it create images? Well, the AI itself for ChatGPT doesn't create images. What it does is it creates prompts for other AI tools to then create images. One of the ones that I recommend is Starry AI, STARRY.ai. That's an AI image generation tool. And when using it, you might want to do a reverse image search after it's generated, just to make sure that it's not too similar to something else that's out on the internet. But it can generate prompts for you to then plug into other tools like that to then generate images for you. So while the AI itself doesn't actually generate images like that, it can be used in conjunction with other AI to create images. So sorry if that was a little bit misleading. And yes, absolutely. The site that I was talking about was Starry AI, and actually I can show it at the end of this presentation. Anyway, moving on. Next up, we're kind of going to be talking about how AI is currently utilized within the insurance marketplace. And I have some great resources linked on this slide as well if you've downloaded the presentation. These are all kind of general references that I used when creating this, but it gave me a general overview of at least what larger agencies have claimed to use AI and within what context they're using it. UHC and Cigna specifically are kind of using it to focus on chatbot interaction. So if you go out to their website and start typing information into the AI itself or the chatbots there, they'll pick up on keywords and use those to kind of analyze what you're actually looking for. And it uses AI kind of similarly to ChatGPT to provide more realistic responses. That said, it's also plugged in directly to their systems. So it's not really like it's, kind of selling anything to you. It's just more used for answering questions. Things like, does my health plan provide coverage under this person? And, they'd be able to look that up and get you an accurate reply. So that's what I mean when I say chatbot interaction. It's not like selling insurance, but it is kind of just generally providing information. The next kind of point is generally fraud detection. Humana's kind of using that more in detail. And then there's claim prediction and analysis, as well as underwriting and claim processing possibilities, which we're going to be getting more into here in a second. But let's look at chatbot integration. Like I said, a bot can be tied directly into AI. Like I kind of mentioned in my last presentation, all AI really is a piece of code. It's a part of an overall program that can be used to kind of analyze overall trends and do that very effectively. So a chatbot tied directly into AI could, use something like throwing your entire reply into the AI for analysis. It looks through, it figures out what you're trying to say, then it uses that to tell the actual chatbot which prompt to pick from its selected, base amount of responses. And it can kind of use that to kind of script you on what your answer to your question really is. It's also used a lot in phone trees. UHC does this quite a bit as well, where like if you call up UHC and say, hey, I'm looking for commissions, it'll pick up on the word that you said, commissions. It'll feed that to its bot, and it'll kick you out to the correct number. So these kinds of things are generally how it's being used for chatbots, at least. Also, it can recommend a list of different types of policies if it's coded properly, but like I said before, that's really speculative. It's not like they're actively doing that right now. Next up is fraud detection. And this one's actually a big topic because it's not just used by insurance carriers, it's also used by banks. Specifically, Humana is using this for kind of detecting fraud as far as claims are concerned. They can use your audit history and claims from your clients to establish patterns of use, and those patterns can factor into determining whether or not a claim is fraudulent. It's really more of a stopgap right now, and it's used for initial analysis, but it's something that's currently being used, at least by Humana. Outside of Humana's carrier use, fraud detection is really kind of a huge deal for AI. It's used to help detect fraudulent use of IDs and codes online. Different products are releasing for personal fraud detection that use AI. I think LifeLock is doing this, but don't quote me on that. And then lastly, it can really mean the difference between a verification email and a complete account lock as far as banks are concerned. Like let's say you're, traveling a lot, and banks normally pick up on that using transactional data. They can say, okay, you don't normally buy things around here, you don't really live around here, these don't really fit your trends. Okay, we're blocking your account until you call us. Well, AI can be used to kind of tailor that a little bit. Let's say an AI for your bank, sees all these weird charges and looks through your history and goes, well, once a year, normally we see charges on this card from this place. He's probably on his yearly vacation, don't block his account. Things like that. And then the last 2 points I kind of combined into one slide because one's more of a possibility and hypothetical, and one's confirmed to be used. And that's claim prediction and analysis for the confirmed to be used part. AI-based analytics are used all the time to, similarly to fraud detection, establish patterns of use and analysis. These predictions can be used to assess the risk of a particular, claim and accelerate claim processing if available. So it uses that to kind of predict what claims you might have in the future based on your medical analysis and your current health data. UHC actually is kind of fully embracing this, and in 2021 it was praised as the industry leader in AI adoption through its AVA program. AVA stands for two things: Agent Virtual Assistant, as well as Automated Vitals Application, though that mainly pertains to devices. Basically, if you're using an approved UHC device, it can connect to the AI, log into whatever account you have with it, and kind of track your data. It can be used to kind of track your overall health trends, and that Fitbit you've got on your wrist, if you're using UHC systems, could be sending literally all of it over to UHC to use to determine what type of risk you are for certain different types of diseases or different types of claims. It's kind of really up in the air. They don't really disclose a ton of what this all ties into, but I think it would be foolish to say that it doesn't tie into things like underwriting and claim processing. Underwriting use is very speculative, and it's not like any company has come out and said, hey, we use AI to underwrite everything, at least as far as medical insurance is concerned. There are one or two sites that use AI to do comparison for individual, but really not many, and most of it's tied to ancillary coverages, things like dental or other sort of homeowners, auto, those kinds of things. But with UHC doing all that it can to integrate this AVA system. I'd be surprised if you don't see it coming to that type of kind of process in the future. So that being said, back to our original questions. How is ChatGPT currently being used in insurance? Not directly, but larger companies are using models like it for predictive services and patient-facing chatbots. In general, how is AI being used in insurance? In a lot of different ways, and not just things like ChatGPT. It's being used for statistical analysis, kind of overall, by a lot of carriers, as well as by wellness advisors and assistants from integrated health apps. And lastly, can I expect AI to replace me as an agent, at least anytime soon? Probably not. It might be useful for helping guide people through filling out forms or for filtering products for clients and helping them get a general idea of what they're looking for before they come to you. But as far as recommending things, direct sales, all of that, I really doubt it'll be used for these kinds of things, at least in the near future. One good thing to know is there was a Pew Research study done in 2023, actually in February, that it was published, that said most people don't trust AI at this point with healthcare decisions or feel comfortable in relying on it. That's based on the Pew Research survey, like I mentioned, but it said that 60% of Americans feel uncomfortable if a healthcare provider relies on AI for help with diagnosis and patient care. Maybe this is changing, but more like because of how people are embracing ChatGPT, but I haven't really seen any solid evidence of this kind of shift in perception. So it's something to kind of keep an eye on, maybe definitely look into it, but I don't think it's in a lot of use in healthcare at this time, at least. That being said, before we get into answering a few other questions and kind of showing off the image generation AI that I was talking about earlier, I just wanted to mention that next time on Tech Tuesday is going to be our final Tech Tuesday of the season. It's going to be on Gone Phishing, which is just general tech security and some basic internet security features you might want to know more about. And a Q&A will follow that presentation as well. Also, don't forget, upcoming on Monday, July 10th, we have our Cornerstone Q&A Cafe, as well as our Social Security, Medicare, and Practical Advice for 2023 with Dennis Haywood on the 11th. And Build Your Brand Social Media Today and How It Plays in Your Marketing is going to be on July 25th. So don't forget about these upcoming webinars as well. And that being said, let's go ahead and get into Starry AI. And I'm actually going to put a link here to it in the chat. One moment. Here we go. Let's see if it'll actually link me there. It's not because it's an ad. One moment. Got to find a direct link. It was starryai.com. Okay. Here we are. And I'm going to copy and put a link here. And that also kind of gets into another question that we have from Bill, which is there are several AI sites out there, but do they involve a subscription? And is there a free version? Well, Starry AI at least does have a free version. If I go up here to the create option, I can continue with Google or continue with Apple. And once I log in, I can kind of use it to create a few different pieces of free art every day. I believe you start with 5 credits every day, and those 5 credits can be used to generate up to 4 images per prompt. So you can upload an image to it as a base and then say, hey, I'd like you to do something based on this, but modify it to look like, I don't know, maybe something more similar to my logo, and then upload the logo as well. And then it'll kind of use those two things together to create a naturally generated image. I say natural as a general tone. There are quite a few different kind of styles that this art generator can generate, and there are several others just like it. I know that the creators of ChatGPT, OpenAI, we're gonna go here real quick, just kind of show it. Here we are. OpenAI has 3 different types of chatbots. And if we go ahead and log in here, it'll let me log in with my email. And I'm going to drag this off screen real quick while I enter my password. Here we are. It has 3 different types of AIs. Well, at least two, and then an API. The integrate OpenAI models into your application or business tab is for API calls. And those API calls can be used to link to your site directly, but it's a premium feature and it's very speculative right now. So I wouldn't recommend using it. I know I mentioned earlier that a lot of websites don't actually have ChatGPT integration. This is kind of what I meant. The API calls that you're using to kind of call in to ChatGPT is kind of, you don't really know what version of ChatGPT you're getting, at least from what I understand. I could be wrong about that, but the version of ChatGPT that you're using matters quite a lot when you're using this. And different, versions of the AI have better capabilities for different things. So it's just something to keep in mind. But they also have DALL-E, which is a realistic image and art integration tool. This is kind of another AI that you could use with conjunction for ChatGPT to have ChatGPT create prompts, and then DALL-E create images off of those prompts. The one caveat here is that for DALL-E access, I think you need a Discord account, which is a separate program that's kind of a general chat program, and you have to sign up for the DALL-E Discord server, I believe. So something to keep in mind if you're interested in using this kind of a thing. Here's another one. Do you recommend to register on websites through Google or Apple credentials? And is there any security difference? I think it's honestly a personal choice. And honestly, I'd recommend neither. I'd recommend, if you have the option, creating your own tool, or not tool, but your own password and username, and just using that. The more things you link to one account, the more risk you have if that one account gets kind of hacked. So if you have, let's say, lost access to your Google account, but you used Google to log in to like 12 different services, guess what? You've also lost access to those 12 different services you use. It's like logging into Facebook with Google. If you lose access to your Google account in that case, you then also lose access to Facebook. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. As far as security is concerned, I recommend generating your own every time. But if you're going to use a service like Apple or Google, I'd probably recommend using Apple over Google, just because Apple generally has better security practices with their specific domain of suite and services. And I have another question here from Bill, which is, what is API? And before I answer that for you, Bill, let me go ahead and put my contact information up on screen again. Just want to make sure that everyone who has a question gets a chance to at least see that. One moment. Here we are. Anyway, what is API? API, I'm blanking on the name of the acronym right now, but basically it's web scraping. It's what allows tools that you create, as far as a developer is concerned, to integrate with websites online. This popular use that's coming to mind offhand is Reddit like modding, or kind of monitoring content. What a lot of people do, as far as that job is concerned, is create programs that take information from their website and then use that to, suggest whether or not it needs moderation, or need someone to come in and, remove the comment, or talk to the person involved and kind of clarify what they're trying to say, maybe edit that comment a little bit. API is the tool that's used to kind of grab that information from the web and throw it to whatever application you're using. Back when the web was being developed, this was basically free. Nowadays, a lot of sites charge for it. ChatGPT and OpenAI definitely will. But basically, it's a tool that allows you to communicate with websites directly. So servers that are owned by another person. That's generally what an API is, at least from a top-level perspective. And I believe that's all of our questions. But like I said before, if you have any other questions and would like to reach out to me directly, please give me a call or send me an email at tlevine@crnstone.com, and I'll be happy to at least look into the question for you. And if I can't give you a direct answer, then I'll at least give you resources to kind of generally find your way. Either way, I've been Tom Levine, Cornerstone's Commissions and Technical Specialist, and I hope you learned something new today. Thank you very much.